Now? There we go. Great. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening for those joining online. Thank you for joining for this important session on getting money where it matters. We'll have some very exciting announcements around locally led adaptation. We are honored to have Gonzalo Munoz of the high-level champions here to say a few words to kick us off. Gonzalo, please.
Oops, not the glasses, yeah. Well, thanks so much. And good afternoon, everyone. If someone is also being broadcasted for some other place of the world, good Monday, probably good Tuesday at this time of the day. And thank all of you for joining in this critical discussion on financing for action on the ground. You know, one thing that struck me for a really long time is how much nature and finance have been kind of the missing link of the climate process and discussion for quite too long, right? And I think that last week we connected that really, really well. So we are in a different moment. But then when it comes to landing it properly, we will not be able to land it properly if finance is only focused on mitigation. We know that. Now the big task and the big challenge for a group like this is land all of the finance excitement that we saw last week, all of the finance need that we realize is critical in this moment, and not only the acceleration of commitment, but the deployment of that money with all of the integrity and accelerated also on adaptation and resilience. So I would like to start by thanking the International Institute for Environment and Development and the WRI team for all the work that you've been doing on locally adaptation principles. And truth to be said, I mean, those principles and your president have been constant throughout all of my time as high-level champion. My first visit was to WRI back in 2019, and to start learning, because this is a learning journey for mostly those of us that are so biased towards mitigation and need to understand the full picture. Still, we need to strengthen locally led adaptation principles in practice, so look forward to continued support from the IIED and the WRI in the Race to Resilience. You might know that the expert peer review group in the Race to Resilience is based on the CR2 Center at the University of Chile. That's not random. It's mostly about making the right connection, making part of the legacy of COP25 and everything that we've done in the last 3 years to be properly connected on not only metrics for the resilience community, but also towards the global stocktake. That is a massive challenge. We have to take that into account. How do we bring all this community and the metrics and the capacity of bringing local-led metrics into the global stocktake? We need to place adaptation and resilience absolutely in part of mitigation. That's why we're here in the Resilience Hub. And again, thanks to our partners, thanks to our team, David, Jorge, Nora, Theo. I mean, this express the level of commitment that we have been developing in the last years around the importance of positioning adaptation and resilience in the center. And we know that we have to mobilize even more state and non-state actors financed towards adaptation. We need to get into community organizations. It's not about what we decide in Glasgow or any type of global summit. We need to connect that very properly. Yesterday we had an incredible documentary being shown by the Sky team, and it was all about the reality and the double and triple effect of the climate crisis in communities all around the world. Those are the people that we're serving, and those are the people that, if we serve them well, will trust that we will be able to connect their needs and their sense of urgency at a global level with everything that is decided by the big leaders of the world. In words of Salim Hook, in the increasing level of and quality of finance initiatives can be scaled and it reaches the ground. So I want to give you a big thank to all the partners and the organizations that are already adopting these principles and its action at the local level that is going to build resilience and create more sustainable future. You know that our name is high-level champions. We haven't won anything. It's just that we're championing what you do. That's what we do. That's what we refer to, right? And we're so pleased to be surrounded by brilliant initiatives, big minds and heart that are capable of doing the work, and therefore, again, if we connect that properly into the Race to Zero, Race to Resilience campaign, I think that we have all the pieces there to win this race. I'm also very pleased that the Frontline Fund Accelerator is one of the Race to Resilient partners to drive the transformation, to get more money where it matters, at the local level, at the very granular level. The campaign is also aiming to increase the awareness and collaboration among non-state actors. That's something that please take into account. We've reached like 2.3 billion people. Our goal is to reach 4 billion people in the 3 areas. All of them are requiring, and some of them very specifically require the financial mechanisms and tools. And we know that building resilience, of course, needs the bottom-up approach and should be driven by our work with the communities and respond to their needs. So with that, just let me open the floor to the organizations who are making it happen. So thank you, everyone, and look forward to hear about all of the solutions that are going to be discussed today for scaling the principles of local-led adaptation. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So that's really encouraging words that we're getting the attention of the high-level champions, that you've made the time to come and spontaneously open this event. That was an unplanned intervention. We're very grateful that you came and joined us. So just, Gonzalo talked about this being a journey, and it really has been. 5-6 years ago, we were having conversations with a huge number of partners saying, why isn't climate finance reaching to the really incredible innovation that was happening at the local level? What is happening? Where are the barriers? And we started this process of dialogues and workshops with a whole range of different partners, from that community level all the way up to the big global funds, to the donors themselves, to a huge range of different intermediaries, trying to understand what are the blockages, and when things are going well, what is it that happened? So using this positive deviance approach, we started trying to pull together all the times that something really transformational was happening and trying to understand what was it that was transformational. And what we came up with were these 8 principles. Under the Global Commission for Adaptation, sorry, there's so many GCAs, get the right one. Under the Global Commission, they invited us as a community to come together and continue to really try and understand what best practice, what good practice really looks like, and how might we transform the climate finance system as a whole. So this is a process of trying to reimagine it. We still haven't fixed it. We've heard a lot today. We think that today or Friday, there's been something in the region of 600 million being announced with some association with these principles. The Adaptation Fund has just had its replenishment, its record-breaking replenishment. They've endorsed these principles. So what do these really mean, and how do we start to put them into practice? Well, over the last year, we've been running dialogues in the regions, Asia, Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and that process has shown that we have over 100 interventions actually on the ground today, where these principles are being applied and finance is being taken from that global level or national level down to the local level. So this is not just a story. This is happening on the ground. The communities that are actually delivering this are here with us, and we'll be hearing from some of them today. And I think what's really important is we get across this message that this money is starting to get where it matters. We can scale it up. We can move a lot faster. And we really need to be holding each other to account now on how we do that. So with that, let me hand over to Christina.
Thank you so much, Claire. And Claire, you didn't introduce yourself, though you don't need an introduction. Claire Shakia, Director for IIED Climate Program. I'm Christina Rombaitis Del Rio from the World Resources Institute, and delighted to be working with IIED and so many partners around the globe on this journey of locally led adaptation. And we've got some exciting announcements today, some exciting endorsements and programs that we're going to take some time to dive into. But I also want to say this is just a moment along that journey, and we invite everyone in this room, everyone watching online, to be part of a growing community of practice, a groundswell that is learning about how to do this right, what works, what doesn't, holding ourselves accountable and mutually accountable, which I think is really critical. So that invitation is there and open to you. With that, I believe I'm going to hand it back to you to introduce our next speaker, Claire.
Thanks very much. So our keynote speaker is Philip Barton, the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State, which basically means Minister in English, to the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. Philip, thank you very much for coming to join us.
Thank you very much, Claire. I think just to set the record straight, I think you've just promoted me to minister. I'm the senior official as a civil servant, just leading our new department. Thank you for inviting me today, and also thank you to you, Gonzalo, for coming along and giving us your blessing, as it were. And thank you to everyone, colleagues in the FCDO, but also in the WR and the IIED for all of your partnership, both on this event, but also everything in the fantastic Resilience Hub and everything you're doing over these 2 weeks. We really appreciate the partnerships you show us. Now, what I thought I'd do is actually say, why does this matter? What's our approach? And, you know, for me and the department and all of my colleagues, what matters most to us is getting money, resources where it's needed most, getting the biggest bang for buck possible. That's kind of a touchstone for the FCDO, and it was for the Department for International Development before we came together as a single department. And that is nowhere more important than in climate finance. And we are really, really clear that if we're to make sure that money gets to where it is most needed on the climate side, we have to have locally led action and advice and input. And without that, we won't be spending the money we do have as wisely as we can. We are therefore going to make locally led adaptation a key priority for the UK's presidency of COP over the year ahead. I will say a little bit about the UK approach. A little bit you might feel is UK propaganda, but I think it's both to say what we're doing and to describe it, also to invite you to challenge us, to say where we can do more, where we can do better, and also to illustrate to others how they could perhaps, if they like what we're doing, copy us. I mean, I think Claire and Christina, you've set out the principles. We as the UK basically championed them. We've endorsed them through Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who's the government's international champion for our work on adaptation and resilience. You saw them set out on the screen earlier, so I won't go through them. It is great now that I think they've been endorsed by over 60 organisations. I think we're therefore making progress. I think we are building momentum. I think we are demonstrating the values of people looking at these principles and saying, yes, you know what, these are the ways in which we want to think about how we are going to do our climate work, how we're going to use our finance, how we make sure we do absolutely have the maximum impact. We had the Climate and Development Ministerial earlier this year, where we launched the task force on access to climate finance. So with Fiji and others, we're aligning programmatic support behind national climate plans, again, making sure through those national plans that we have the local level access to financial flows, the local level input to how the resources we're devoting into this area are best put to use. We want to make sure that there's a step change in access both to the finance but also new and innovative approaches, that we can learn from best practices around the world. We can really learn from what people are developing for themselves to address the problems that they face day in, day out. We're also providing support, in addition through the Adaptation Action Coalition, to the delivery work strand of the locally led adaptation to enable more and better delivery on the ground in support of the principles. We've announced continuing support for what I think you know as Life AR, the LDC Initiative for Effective Adaptation and Resilience. It's, we think, the best way of transforming how climate finance is accessed by the least developed, how we can manage that finance most effectively to make sure it reaches the people who most need it, how we can, if you like, get beyond central strategic budget making at the national level down to the grassroots level to make sure the money reaches for those for whom it's intended. And we will deliver the intention of at least 70% of our finance supporting local actions by 2030, and that's our target in this area. We've been delighted that we've been announcing this week that we're supporting it for another 5 years. Delighted that other partners like the United States are also going to provide financial support, and we very much hope and look forward to other countries joining us in that support over the months and years ahead. And, you know, we think this is the way to catalyse local action. This is the way to make sure that, you know, the world's poorest and most affected by climate, you know, the 1 billion that people talk about, do have better and more effective and more locally led access to the financing that they need to address the challenges that they face. Today we've announced an additional 45 million to help empower local communities and grassroots women's groups across the Indo-Pacific region to lead efforts in their communities to build local resilience to climate change, but also to, at the same time, challenge gender inequalities. And we all know that when you look at issues like climate, as you address other issues like gender, you also tackle climate. These two are not separate things that you should see of in different silos. They're absolutely interrelated, and we really can do two things at once, if you like, and achieve more. And then finally, we'll be as part of a wider programme, stepping up our overall support in Asia. The Minister announced it this morning, some £274 million of climate action for a resilient Asia. We want a big part of that to be at the community level. We have a new community resilience partnership programme which will fund programmes and projects that mobilise large-scale public investments to empower communities and women's groups to drive the sorts of locally led adaptation that we're talking about this afternoon. We're really pleased in our partners, with you in the IIED, with the ADB, with the WIRO Commission. These are key partners for us in delivering this work. So thank you so much to all of you for coming along this afternoon. I'm delighted that it's so crowded up here in the hub that people are standing on the stairs and downstairs. For those of you who aren't present in person, this is it's a sellout event. So well done again to the organisers for choosing a sellout event, and thank you very much for inviting me this afternoon. Apologies, I have to run to something else now, but thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
We have to do a little bit of shuffling, so I'm going to invite our next speakers to please come up and have a seat. We have Secretary Tobiko, Warren Evans, and Age Jorgensen, if you don't mind coming up real quick. And just to kick us off, if you'd like, maybe over here might be easier. Yeah, thank you. And just to kick us off, we've got a exciting program on, have a seat if you're more comfortable. We have an exciting program being launched today that we want to hear more about, focused in Kenya, specifically called Financing Locally Led Action in Kenya. So here to speak about that is Secretary Tobiko, who is Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Environment and Forestry of the Government of Kenya. Welcome, sir. The floor is yours. And then I believe we have a representative who will speak from the World Bank.
Thank you so very much, ma'am. And good evening. I apologize, I've come a little later. We were engaged in some ministerial meetings. Locally led adaptation is music to our ears, but it is pleasant music. With me here, we have colleagues, and I have a governor, one of the governors in Kenya. The governance arrangement, the national government and the subnational government we call the county government. And the county government, Dr. Otichilo, he's a governor for Vihiga, but also the chair of the Climate Change Committee of the Council of Governors. For us, we are absolutely delighted to hear this. It is embedded in our tradition, in our African tradition, in our culture, in our communities. So we may have come up with new terminologies. Nothing wrong with that. Resilience, adaptation, mitigation, that's all good. But our communities have lived and still do live on the ground, undergoing all these impacts on climate change. They have developed their own adaptive capacities. They have developed their own knowledge and science. The problem has been we, the most educated, we, the development partners, have seen them as sort of those who require education. All what they need is to be held by the hand and be supported and respected. They know their needs more than any one of us. And they know how to do it if given the support and the recognition. That's what really all this is about. And I'm quite delighted to hear development partners now talking about locally led. It used to be community-based, if I remember, not too long ago. Now it is locally led. In fact, I would suggest, with respect, that led be owned. So led and owned by the communities. The principles that are here are absolutely key to any success. That is where the rubber hits the ground. It is important we devolve decision-making to the local community. It is important we address those structural inequalities on the ground, and there are inequalities. Women, children, the elderly, the marginalized suffer doubly. And so for us really, and shortly we'll be announcing, I'm sure launching, I don't know whether it's launching or, yes, a World Bank funded project called FLOCA. Again, it's based on the same philosophy and principles. It is also embedded in our constitution. And there are benefits beyond just adaptive capacity and resilience. It will deal, you're talking about nature-based solution, ecosystem-based adaptation, have core benefits that would sort of help us remove this distinction that we fight all over about mitigation. Because you will have mitigation benefits in locally led adaptation. You'll have resilience, community resilience. So for us really, this is the model that and Kenya fully supports. Our president, as you know, participated in the adaptation, Global Adaptation Summit in January, during which some of these principles were showcased, and we fully embrace them. And I really commend all of you, our partners, the local actors. But beyond the terminologies, and this should be the last point, beyond the terminologies, I think we must ensure that the money goes to where it is most needed within the shortest time possible, because there are huge delays, and I'm not going to, huge delays sometimes. It takes about 3 years minimum, all right? Proposal after proposal, you always send back and you're told it is not bankable. And I hope one of the principles here is, what I see here is patient and is easily accessible finance. That's so key, right? And then the issue of respecting, building capacity for ownership and sustainability. Most of the projects that we have in our country, and I suppose in your countries too, is they are seen by communities as foreign projects. The moment the terminal date for the project ends and the benefactors leave, the community see this as belonging, it's like some project from outer space. It's not theirs. And that is how projects collapse, because alienate the community. So you need community ownership participation to ensure not just the core benefits, not just the resilience, but sustainability. That is the way to go. I thank you.
Now, I'm having a little bit of trouble. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Secretary, for your remarks. They were fantastic. You may stay. You may, if you need to. Well, we do have another speaker to speak on this program. We have, I believe, online Louise Herrmann from the World Bank. She's the Global Director for Social Development at the World Bank, joining from Washington, D.C. Louise, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to all those of you in Glasgow, and good morning or good evening to those of you tuning in from other parts of the globe. It is really my sincere pleasure to be joining you today at COP26 and to be with the government of Kenya, and in particular, the Cabinet Secretary Tobiko at this event to announce the Kenya Financing Locally Led Climate Action Project, or AKA FLOCA as we call it. As the Cabinet Secretary said, the FLOCA program establishes the first national scale model of devolved climate finance and supports Kenya in translating its ambitious climate agenda into scaled-up action on the ground. The program recognizes that locally led climate adaptation is more effective than top-down programs, as we just heard from the Cabinet Secretary, in that it allows local people who are more aware of their context, feeling the impacts directly of climate change, to design a program for action that will affect change. What's more, the program FLOCA applies principles of citizen engagement in climate decision-making and builds on the foundations of Kenya's long program of devolution. FLOCA strengthens and builds on existing government systems and serves as a platform to work with other partners and donors with financial and technical resources, but in a way that is government-driven. This is about building relationships and partnerships for climate risk management. The FLOCA program was designed drawing on country climate change pilots and reflects the World Bank's long experience in community-driven development program, which emphasize community participation and community decision-making over where resources are spent and in implementing the programs that are selected. We see this model of devolved climate finance as a powerful mechanism to channel climate finance to the local level where it's needed most, but also to drive inclusive development and ownership and accountability. The World Bank Group is the largest financier of climate action, having committed $26 billion in 2021 alone to climate finance, of which 2/3 is directed to adaptation. The World Bank's Group's Climate Action Plan commits at least 35% of our resources over the next 5 years to climate finance, of which half will go to adaptation efforts. We are committed in socially sustainable development and inclusion to supporting locally led climate action through mechanisms that operate at scale to get finance to where it is needed most to address the challenges of climate change. We are keen to see other countries adopt the FLOCA model, and we are committed to capturing and working with the government of Kenya and the communities and the CSOs involved to develop the learning and knowledge from this experience so that we can share it with other countries. Let me close to say my sincere gratitude, first of all, to the people on the ground with whom we're working with, to the civil society, of course, to the government of Kenya for its leadership and its commitment that it's shown to this agenda of locally led climate finance, being the first to have an entire project with us dedicated to this. I'd also like to thank the governments of Denmark and Sweden for their collaboration and their support in the development of this program. And of course, the International Institute for Environment and Development for their intellectual and technical contributions. Thank you all, and I look forward to going on this journey and learning from our experience in Kenya and sharing with you more broadly. Thanks.
Okay, sorry. We will get better at this as time goes on. Thank you so much, Louise, and the Cabinet Secretary. We are now moving from that very exciting new national level program for locally led adaptation in Kenya to the Asia region and the Asian Development Bank. Warren Evans, as Asian Development Bank Special Advisor for COP26, would you like to introduce the Community Resilience Partnership Program?
That might be what you need to do. Yeah. This one's on red now. Hello? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So thanks very much. It wouldn't be any fun if there weren't any technical difficulties, you know. So I'm really pleased to be here and have the opportunity to talk about a new initiative that was really just launched today. But before I do that, I want to mention that last week our president of the Asian Development Bank announced that ADB would move from a target of $80 billion cumulative from 2019 to 2030 for climate finance to $100 billion. And that $20 billion was not just drawn out of thin air. It was based on a fairly detailed analysis which really showed
that we were underperforming on adaptation, that there was a lot of room for us to change how we do work and focus a lot more financing on adaptation. Much of that will go into policy reform, institutional reform, building capacity in client countries, and some larger scale projects. But a lot of it is going to be driven through communities. And so the initiative that was announced this morning is really critical to help us understand how to drive those funds through local communities. It's the Community Resilience Partnership Program, CRPP, established in partnership with Nordic Development Fund, thank you very much, and the government of the United Kingdom, just mentioned this a little while ago, working together on our joint commitment to scale up climate adaptation actions in the Asia-Pacific region. I want to highlight 5 features of the CRPP that we think are critical for generating lessons and being able to then integrate those lessons into our normal operations. First, it's a 10-year program. It's not a short-term initiative. It really demonstrates the reality that we need long-term commitments to build resilience. Second, CRPP has an explicit focus on supporting resilient solutions at the nexus of climate and poverty. It's critical to recognize this, considering that climate impacts, and particularly now COVID-19, is pushing additional millions of people into poverty. Third, the focus of CRPP is to increase investments on climate adaptation at the local level. This focus on investments allows us to make a strong case for local adaptation to national agencies that typically hold the purse. With an initial target of $75 million for the first 5 years, $75 million, we hope to leverage more than $500 million worth of investments in climate adaptation at the local level. That $75 million is pure grant. Fourth, the CRPP has a special window to support women-focused investments. The key here is not to treat women as vulnerable population, but as agents of change to deliver resilient solutions on the ground. And finally, it's a partnership at the heart of the CRPP, including partnership with a range of organizations, think tanks, grassroots women's organizations, bilateral donors, and financial institutions, and of course, in particular, local communities. And I want to reinforce what our colleague from Kenya, the minister from Kenya, mentioned. Local ownership, local demand, locally driven, that's how these partnerships are going to work. We've got a lot to learn in how to take the scale of the kind of finance that ADB provides, and get it to the community level so that it's community owned and successful. So we look forward to working with anybody who wants to work with us on this. The partnership's wide open, but we're very pleased to have had the opportunity to launch it today and to mention it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as you mentioned, we've already had Philip Barton's announcement of the UK funding for this initiative. So please, Age Jorgensen from the Nordic Development Fund.
Yes, good afternoon everybody. Thank you very much. I'm from the Nordic Development Fund. We are a climate finance institution owned by the 5 Nordic countries, which are Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway and Sweden. And we provide climate financing to countries in Africa, Asia and Latin America. We are very happy to be part of this new Community Resilience Partnership Program. We had an event just a couple of hours ago called Let's Talk About Adaptation, and there we had the Climate Policy Initiative actually also talk about the new annual statistics on climate finance. And out of the many billions of dollars that were allocated for climate finance in 2020, only 7% was actually for adaptation. So how much is actually coming to the local level, even if adaptation takes place at the local level, not it's very little that actually trickle down to the local level. So we are excited about this new initiative. For us, it's also very much an opportunity to learn this is a 10-year process, and we'll be learning along as we go along. We have some very strong partners, IIED, we have the Huaruc Commission, and we are also looking at other partners that could actually contribute to develop further interventions. We know that if you want to be, that this is different, because again, this is going to be decisions made by those that are actually affected by climate change. So that means that we are going to have this very strong community-led aspect or element in the program, and this should not only be in how do you say identifying and designing interventions, but we should also have like locally led monitoring, because we know that once you're involved in the whole cycle of an investment or a project, it's really both a learning but very much an empowerment process also. If we look at all these 93% of the other climate finance, we see a lot of these very large, for example, renewable energy projects that are often stalled for years. And why are they stalled for years? Because they don't talk to local communities. So again, this whole dialogue and consultation process is something that will be very much stressed. So this is a partnership, not only a partnership between the financing institution, but really a partnership also with people on the ground. And coming from the Nordic countries, we really appreciate the very strong focus on gender equality in this program. There's a special gender window, as it is called, and we have allocated substantial part of our funding to the gender window. We believe that gender equality is the only way forward. We are all affected by climate change, but we know that often women are actually, and girls are actually even more disadvantaged. We really need to address this. We have seen it. There have been several studies on the impacts of COVID-19. Like, for example, in the case of Africa, we saw that 80% of women entrepreneurs actually had to close down their business during, and perhaps even lose their business during the COVID-19. In Asia, there's a similar studies showing that the majority of women that were in employment, both formal and informal, have actually lost their jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are lots of things to do, and we really welcome this initiative. We can also mention that this will not be, even if you mentioned it's grant-based, and we have this huge grant-based element in it, but we will actually be, there will be many different instruments, financial instruments deployed in this. So we are looking at grants mainly to kind of get things off the ground, but then we are looking also at insurance, for example, resilience insurance as one, disaster risk insurance. We are looking at microfinance. We're looking at a number of different ways that you can actually come in and support this. So, yeah, from my side, this should be all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So, for those of us that have been working on this idea of locally led adaptation for some years, this is a very exciting day. 2 really significant programs being announced. And we have, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've been running this dialogue, a group of 10 organisations, IIED and a group of 8 others. And one of our colleagues, Anke Granderson, is able to join us now from the Caribbean, from the organisation Canary. Now, as we've been doing these dialogues, we've been asking, what is it that's going to be most significant? What is it that we need to have? What change are we looking to achieve that's going to really make the next biggest difference in locally led adaptation getting to scale? So, Anke Granderson, if you would, come in, reflect on these 2 announcements and tell us how you think this is stacking up to what we're trying to achieve. Over to you, Anka. Yeah, please.
Thanks for that, Claire. Greetings to you all from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm sorry that I'm not there in person in Glasgow, but really appreciate the opportunity to participate virtually and share some reflections as an NGO working with frontline communities and how we can really reform top-down approaches for delivering climate finance and enable locally led bottom-up interventions. So yes, it is very exciting to see the journey, as Claire mentioned, and also to hear all of these announcements based on what's being announced from Kenya and the World Bank, as well as from the Nordic Development Fund, so that we can really start seeing a push towards addressing the critical gap where we already know that a very small percentage of overall climate finance actually gets to the people that need it the most on the front lines, so that they can design and deliver actions to meet their needs and on their own terms. So in terms of some of the reflections, I think what's really interesting is to think about what makes efforts businesses as usual, and what also are some of the best practices and innovative models of financing and decentralizing governance across this global south that needs to be replicated and scaled up as part of the process. I think being part of the community of practice and the regional dialogue series, there've been some really interesting perspectives that have been shared by the over 250 participants that have participated in that process over September and October. I think one of the key things, obviously, is the fact that there's really amazing work happening on the ground, and we had those 100 examples that Claire mentioned earlier, and all of the other examples that all these funders are trying to support, and that make it clear that locally led adaptation is happening and is having real impact on the ground. But we do need much more support to scale up these impacts and effectively meet the needs of the most vulnerable. And so one of the things, as we hear all of these announcements, towards the goal of scaling up the finance, I really wanted to just put out there that, we actually have a target in mind in thinking about what we're looking for. And so firstly, we want to see that at least 50% of overall climate finance for adaptation, and half of this is 25% is actually going to locally led adaptation. And so in terms of actual amounts, if we use the 100 billion per year goal as the floor, this would mean at least 25 billion per year to support locally led adaptation. And so this is kind of the target that we're aiming for in terms of what we want to see from funders, what we want to see mobilized, and how we can really scale up impact to achieve what we want to achieve. But it's not just about quantity, it's also about quality. And it's really interesting to hear about the mechanisms that are being designed in terms of the two facilities that have just been described, because we really need to ensure that we're delivering the finance in ways that really empower actors to design and implement adaptation actions for fair and just outcomes. And so we really want to see that programmatic approach that provides flexible, patient, and predictable funding, and not just in 3 or 4 year projects, but over 5, 10 years or more, recognizing that adaptation is a long-term process that can take decades, not just a few years. We also want to see that funding help to build local technical and organizational capacities and local institutions to really effectively deliver climate finance. Because that's actually what we need on the ground. We need strong local institutions to really work with these frontline communities and ensure that we're delivering climate finance effectively. I think another interesting thing is to really think about the need to shift towards use of regional, national, and subnational institutions to deliver finance, such as local banks, cooperatives, and civil society organizations, which are closer to the ground and more accountable to local actors, rather than the international institutions and intermediaries like the UN agencies and the multilateral development banks. These homegrown intermediaries can be much more effective as they're embedded at the national and local levels, and can continue to provide support over the long term and facilitate inclusive governance where the marginalized and most vulnerable groups have a voice in defining priority needs and how funding is allocated. And it would really be great to see, and I would love to hear more of the announcement talking about really providing that direct access to finance in amounts that are suitable to local actors. So small grants, if that's what the small CSOs and groups that are working on the ground need, up to medium grants, as well as microloans, small loans, and that we're using the local intermediaries to support this process. And we also really need to think about simplifying the process. So how is it that we're actually getting that funding out? And are we really thinking about addressing some of the onerous application procedures and requirements that are actually a key barrier to access, and developing a more simplified and shared application process, for example, across the large climate funds to make it easier for groups to access these funds. And actually, I was really happy to hear, I can't remember who it was, one of the speakers talking about having more meaningful outcome-oriented metrics for funded projects and ensuring that these are aligned with the principles for locally led adaptation, so we can really see that we're achieving the impacts that we want to. And I think I also wanted to mention the fact that we do need to create enabling environments for business unusual to thrive. We actually need to see national policies and budgets that support local adaptation. We even need to also see legal commitments that mandate a certain percentage of funds going to local actors. And we need to see the structures for decentralization of funding to district and community levels to really have an impact in terms of how we're delivering that finance. So I think with that, I'll probably wrap it up here in terms of some of the key reflections that I had in terms of what we want to see to really have the impact that we want to have. And so really simply put, we must ensure that we get the money where it matters. It needs to get to the frontline communities, to the households, to the small-scale farmers and fisherfolk, to the various community-based organizations that are already bearing the brunt of the impacts and will continue to do so that they can adapt and build their own local resilience. I think we have a really great sense of what is working and what is needed. And so there really isn't any excuse for inaction. And it's going to be really exciting to see how we move forward to really scale up that impact and scale up financing and get it to those that need it the most. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inka, for those clear asks to the community here to deliver a comprehensive set on both quality and quantity measures for locally led adaptation. So we've heard about a couple of important signature initiatives, important initiatives at scale on locally led adaptation action. We're now going to hear from some leading bilateral funders and have some exciting announcements from them. And we'll start with Gillian Caldwell, excuse me for mispronouncing. She's the climate coordinator for the U.S. Agency for International Development. The floor is yours.
Okay, so thanks so much to WRI and IIED and the other 8 organizations who took the lead on this. On one hand, you know, it's too long in coming, as we all know. And on the other hand, it probably took a really long time to agree those principles and even longer to get a bunch of big institutions like USAID on board. But I was fortunate enough to be one of the last people to clear our commitment to this just 2 weeks ago, and I was really happy to do so. People have spoken at length about why this is important, and so and I think we're short of time, so I'm going to skip that and just go straight to what this means. So USAID, you're hearing it here first. USAID has committed to these principles. As well we should have. And I just want to talk about, this isn't just about talk, right? This is about action. So let me just give you a picture of what it will mean for us, a few examples of what it will mean to live by these principles. So the first principle, devolving decision-making to the lowest appropriate level. You may have heard Administrator Power speak this week about our new guidance, which is basically focused on more equitable, accountable, and locally led partnerships. Basically, every single USAID mission around the world, that's 80 in total, must work towards direct awards to non-traditional partners, including local entities, local government organizations, locally established partner, and non-local organizations. And everybody needs to be clear, and we all have a deadline for defining how we're going to get there. So that's number one. The second principle, addressing structural inequalities faced by women, youth, children, disabled, displaced, indigenous people, and marginalized ethnic groups. So we just released a strategy for public comment, and we welcome your feedback. That comment period is open till November 24th. But we have, in accordance with the second principle, an explicit target to support the participation and leadership of indigenous peoples, local communities, women, and youth in climate action in at least 40 countries worldwide by 2030. Third, providing patient and predictable funding that can be accessed more easily. In addition to the commitment we have to address these structural inequities that indigenous peoples and others faced, we are also increasing our finance that will go directly to indigenous peoples in accordance with our principles pertinent to indigenous peoples, which I think are quite forward-leaning and worth taking a look at. Fourth, when it comes to investing in local capabilities to leave an institutional legacy, our strategy commits all 80 missions worldwide to working in close alignment with the countries in which we operate to deliver on those nationally determined contributions and national adaptation plans. And we want to ensure that we make substantial and sustained progress by working at a local level with these governments and their NGO partners in at least 40 countries worldwide by 2030. Fifth, building a robust understanding of climate risk and uncertainty. You may have heard about the new U.S. government-wide PREPARE initiative on resilience announced by President Biden earlier this week. As part of that commitment, USAID is committed to mobilizing $1 billion of public and private finance for climate-resilient water and sanitation service. Sixth, flexible programming and learning. That's very embedded in our culture already. So we have a program cycle which includes a continuous process of learning. In fact, our strategy was the product of over 40 listening sessions worldwide. We're about to have another one tomorrow, and you're welcome to join us. Seventh, accountability and transparency. We've got the International Aid Transparency Initiative. So we have a data development library at which you can access a lot of insight regarding our work. And finally, collaborative action and investment. So there we recently joined Aim4C and PREPARE, which are just two examples of collaborating on multi-stakeholder initiatives to inspire action to advance adaptation. So, the bottom line is this is, we do need to get beyond the talk, and the talk is coming far too late, as everybody knows. And we need to move to action, and that's not easy for an organization like USAID with 18,000 staff worldwide. Things don't move swiftly, but I'm very impatient, so I hope we'll get there sooner rather than later. And I know there's a lot of dedication at the agency, which has been born of the discussions we've had in shaping this strategy. So we look forward to working with you, and we look forward to your feedback on the strategy.
Thank you, Gillian. We look forward to your impatience and working together on this. Next, we're going to hear from Freuda Nirgard, who is Chief Advisor for the Department of Green Diplomacy and Climate from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here today and to represent Denmark on this occasion. And I wish to start off by thanking WRI and IIED for bringing us together, but also for having driven us towards the locally led adaptation principles. And I'll start off by saying that I'm even more pleased that just before the COP here in Glasgow, Denmark did endorse the principles. And we've been sort of wanting to do this for a while, but I'll come back to why we were a little bit maybe late in a way. But there are two main reasons why we stand behind them now and have endorsed the principles. We know the backdrop of the recent UNEP Adaptation Finance Gap report, stark reminder of the estimated cost of adaptation finance, which is 5 to 10 times greater than at the current levels and widening, unfortunately. We also know about the $10 billion commitment, which we're not delivered on fully, and out of that, about $1 of 4 is for adaptation. So that's the background. What we've done in Denmark is we have committed to provide at least our share of the $100 billion US dollars. But not only that, we have also committed that out of that climate finance, 60% shall go to adaptation finance. And it will all be grant-based, and it will be targeted to the least developed countries. We not only wish to increase the quantity, but also the quality and the accessibility of adaptation finance. And this is also why Denmark is a founding member of the Champions Group on Adaptation Finance, which will hold a side event, I believe, in this room a little later this afternoon. The second reason why, and this is also why we were a little bit late in endorsing the principle, is that we have just recently launched our relatively new Danish strategy for development cooperation. And this is a strategy which has been approved by our Folketing, which is our parliament. And I'll just like to allow me to quote what we got into this. And this is actually then approved by not only our minister, but also our parliament. And one of the action points here is to promote local climate change adaptation, including nature-based solutions that ensure ownership and involvement of vulnerable people and communities in project development and their access to climate finance. So that's how we have phrased, and we have a strong hook now in our brand new development cooperation strategy. And obviously with that hook and against that basis, there's no other thing for us to do to endorse the principle for locally led adaptation action. I will just give a very specific reason why we also scaling up, how we are scaling up adaptation action. We have actually supported adaptation action for quite a while, but now we will scale it up. And I'll end off just by mentioning two examples. And the one is the one that we have heard about just a little earlier, and that is the Kenya Financing Locally Led Adaptation Program 21 to 26. And we're very happy to join Sweden and the World Bank, as we heard earlier, and also the Cabinet Secretary Tobiko has mentioned. We're proud and happy and privileged to be part of that program, which will aim to strengthen local resilience to impact of climate change at the local level, and also emphasize governance, social inclusion, citizen participation of climate risk management, and support priority actions identified by counties and their citizens. The second example I'll just mention here now is that we have decided to support local governments in mainstreaming climate change adaptation into regular decision-making processes and development planning and resource allocation. And we'll do this through a contribution of close to $8 million to the UNCDF administered local climate adaptation living facility local. So with these few words, I'll just say I look very much forward to continue to work with our partners on this based on the principles, and indeed also work together with local communities in our partner countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on that new strategy and plan. We look forward to seeing it in action. Next, I'd like to introduce Louise Herrmann, who's Senior Policy Advisor for Climate and Environment for the Department of International and Organizational and Policy Support for the Swedish International Development Corporation, SIDA. The floor is yours.
So thank you very much. I'm the last one out. I don't know if you want to stand up and shake a little bit. Are you tired? Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me to this very important event to discuss scaling up locally led adaptation. I'm really pleased to see so many of you here because that gives me hope that we can collaborate and really strengthen these efforts and get the money where it matters. Sweden, I don't know if you know Sweden, but Sweden is quite a large country geographically, but it's a small population of 10 million. Yet, we're the world's largest donor of climate aid by capita, and we plan to double our contribution by 2025. The Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, is an important actor within financing for climate adaptation. During the last 4 years, approximately 80% of our climate finance have been directed to adaptation and cross-cutting issues. One key aspect of SIDA's work within climate adaptation is ensuring that climate finance really reaches the local level where it's most needed. Locally led climate adaptation initiatives provide local institutions and communities with more direct access to climate finance, which in turn enable them to implement adaptive actions in relation to existing and emerging local needs. So, IIED. SIDA provides core support to IIED and has in this way contributed to the development of the locally led principles. And these 8 principles have been fundamental components of the Swedish Development Cooperation actually for a significant period of time already. And SIDA is therefore delighted to join the growing group of actors informally endorsing these principles in its development cooperation. Yay! So, and SIDA is currently providing support to various locally led adaptation initiatives and is committed to facilitate inclusive locally led adaptation in vulnerable contexts. So the endorsement of these principles for locally led adaptation constitute an important step in this direction. And I would like to give you 3 concrete examples how SIDA works, but I don't know if we have time for that. One is, of course, together with Kenya, that SIDA is in cooperation with Denmark, the World Bank, and the government of Kenya supporting this project that the World Bank and the Minister Toboiko presented, the initiative financing locally led climate action. And it was very interesting to hear more about that because I've not been involved in the project myself, so it was very good to hear about that. And in Bangladesh, we co-finance the local government initiative on climate change together with the EU and with support from UNEP and UNCDF. And this program, it focuses on strengthening a financing mechanism for community-based climate adaptation solutions through local governments. And this initiative aims to improve local capacity to develop plans that integrate climate adaptation measures and disaster risk management. And in addition, the initiative sets out to use local evidence to improve policy and practice for union parishads and national systems in relation to climate change adaptation. And by building local capacity, the local ownership, as you spoke so much about, and reaches the sustainability of the implemented climate adaptation initiative is strengthened. Sorry. So we also finance Local, and I think you know which program that is, that it's a UNCDF program. I will not go into that in detail. But I will just say, finally, that we will continue to work together in close collaboration with our partners. And I think it's important that we work at global, national, and with our local partners to increase our support in line with the principles for locally led adaptation and really get the money where it matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So the numbers of people endorsing the principles has been increasing. We're not going to go through every one, but I'll just mention a few. While those that are going to be doing the hard talk, feel free to come up. So first of all, it's the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs endorsed so recently they couldn't actually find a speaker to come today, but it's wonderful news that they've also joined the other bilaterals. The Near East Foundation, which has been doing some amazing work in some of the fragile conflict-affected states. IUCN, two of those regional or more local intermediaries, Funde Cooperación and Fundación Avina, both also endorsing the principles, both have accreditation with the Adaptation Fund and have or are aiming to get GCF accreditation. One of our partners here, Eileen's from Crpp. Crpp is also endorsed, and Wangi Tangi, both of which representative of indigenous peoples from Latin America. The Green Africa Youth Organization is also endorsed as of today. Youth Climate Lab also endorsed. Fauna and Flora International, important partners on the protection of nature, have also endorsed, helping strengthen that climate, nature and poverty focus. ECO and a whole range of others. There are now 70. We know there's a number of other organisations that were seeking to endorse over the last couple of days, so I'm sure there'll be more this week. So well done, and thank you all for joining us on this journey. Are you going to introduce me? I'm introducing, okay. So now, for those that have endorsed, so we had really important endorsements by the Adaptation Fund, and then the GCF, whilst they haven't actually endorsed, have noted that their enhanced direct access is the route by which they'll be doing more. So we have an opportunity now to have a bit of a discussion between Eileen Cunningham from Crpp and Pa Osman from the GCF to discuss how the GCF might be thinking about applying the principles. And then following that, it'll be Suranjana and Sailaha Dvorchik, I'm so sorry, I should have asked you how you pronounce your surname first, from the Adaptation Fund. So this is, we've got endorsers, we've got people that have endorsed from different levels, asking each other, how's it going, and beginning to explore the accountability side of endorsing these principles. Please.
Thank you, Claire. Nice to see you again, Pa, here. Yeah. One of the first thing I want to ask you is about the Green Climate Fund is the largest of the climate funds, and yet has only disbursed a nominal 38% for adaptation. So how the fund will increase this nominal amount to get closer to that 50% parity between adaptation and mitigation?
Thank you for this question. As you might be aware, the GCF is the only climate fund that is committed to a 50-50 balance between adaptation and mitigation. And this is based on the different levels of concessionalities, and that is why it is also in grant equivalent terms. So based on the various concessionalities, grants, concessional loans, guarantees, and equity, we are not accounting for the 50-50 in nominal terms, but in grant equivalent terms. This is the only way we can compare apples to apples. But if it is in nominal terms, we wouldn't be able to compare what we provide in terms of grants, concessional loans, and also guarantees and equity.
Thank you, Pa. And furthermore, only 10% of the GCF funding has gone directly to national entities. How can this be increased to support greater national capacities and national priorities?
Thank you for this question. Also, as part of the updated strategic plan of the GCF 2020-2023, we have been tasked to increase funding through direct access entities. One from 300 million from the IRMF to 1.1 billion US dollars in terms of public financing. And for private financing is from 500 million to 1.6 billion US dollars. So we are making every effort to strengthen the capacity of direct access entities for them to access financing through the GCF. We have 64% of the accredited entities being direct access entities, and we did develop a direct access entity action plan to enhance the strengthening of their capacities and also supporting them from project development through the readiness preparatory support program, and also developing concept notes and PPF so that they can have more funding that would meet the targets in the updated strategic plan.
Thank you very much, Pa. I'm very glad to hear about this because this is one of the things that the CSOs and the indigenous people always raise during the board meeting. And finally, we understand that to enhance direct access mechanisms is undergoing review to improve its utilization. How can these mechanisms be used to support greater locally led climate change adaptation? What changes would you need to make to support greater locally led adaptation? And what barriers would you need to address on this?
Thank you for this question. The enhanced direct access is meant to devolve ownership and in terms of access to locally led communities. But what we've realized is that the direct access entities that are accredited through the enhanced direct access, most of them are accredited for grants. We have 72 direct access entities, and only 1/3 of them are accredited to grant awards and on lending, which is the modality through which they can access the enhanced direct access. So what we are doing now, the independent evaluation unit of the GCF is assessing the portfolio, because we have committed 200 million US dollars through this modality, but we have only approved 3 funded proposals that amount to 46 million US dollars. So we have quite a balance, and we want to see what were the challenges and the barriers for accessing this. And based on the assessment of the independent evaluation unit, we would try to ensure that capacity is strengthened. We simplify the process and seek further guidance in terms of the enhanced direct access entity. You know that we did engage with our partners to work on the EDA 2, which is more flexible and more friendly, and we hope once it is adopted by the board, it will be able to facilitate simplification and also direct access to locally led adaptation.
Thank you very much, Pa. I want to ask the last one, because I'm very interested in this one. How could enhanced direct access support meaningful engagement of the grassroots organization? My organization, by example, is a woman grassroots organization, and we know there is a lot of challenge to have access to the GCF. So how this can be improved?
As you are aware, we are a country-driven partnership organization. Everything we do is originating from the countries. We have provided further guidance through the Readiness Preparatory Support Program and the Readiness Guidebook for NDAs to ensure that in their stakeholder engagements, they bring in a wide range of partners, including the women, private sector, the youth organizations, and through the Readiness Preparatory Support Program, we are hoping that the NDAs would open up to ensure that there is a diversity of stakeholders that can access capacity building and also project preparatory support to the GCF.
Thank you very much. Pa, and it was nice to see you and share this time with you, and I hope everything really work for the grassroots organization and from the national entities also. Thank you.
If you may allow me, excuse me, I have another meeting to attend. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I don't know if this is working. Hello? Is this working? Can you just share? Yeah. Okay. We'll share that one then. Okay. I'll put it down for you. Okay. Hi Saliha, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Suranjana and I work for the Vairo Commission, and we work with women's groups all over the world. So I'm particularly interested in how the Adaptation Fund is aligning with the principles for locally led adaptation. So my first question to you is that I see that the Adaptation Fund has endorsed the principles for locally led action on adaptation, and why did you do this? What did you see as the value that these principles bring to your work?
Thank you, Suranjana. Well, first of all, the reason we did it, the simple answer is because it was easy. We were already abiding by these principles, and we didn't really need to adjust our operations in any way. So that was the reason we were able to adopt them quite quickly. And without too much hassle from our board, which doesn't give us too much hassle, I must say. The reason why we are so aligned with the principles for local adaptation is that, locally led adaptation, is that I think the way that the Adaptation Fund was created, it was established in order to finance, first of all, concrete adaptation action, support the most vulnerable communities, and to support the direct access modality, essentially providing funding directly to countries, from the fund to the countries without an intermediary. We still provide some funding through intermediaries to countries that do not have the capacity or have not yet accredited a national, we call it implementing entity. But we do have 32 national implementing entities all over the world, and that number is growing, particularly since recently our board decided that each country can have more than one, so up to 2 national implementing entities. And so these national implementing entities are basically national agencies that know the context, that have the networks locally, nationally or locally, and that are able to do the kind of work that obviously we cannot do being based in Washington, D.C. And I think this is something that separates or differentiates the Adaptation Fund from other funds. Of course, GCF is now also doing direct access, which is wonderful. But we have stayed small and we have stayed local. I mean, small is a relative word, but compared to our sister funds, we are. We have been developing financing opportunities that actually continue to cater to communities on the ground and our national implementing entities who can access these, who can access funds through these special funding window. So I just want to mention one, although we have several. So one that was, for example, recently established is the Enhanced Direct Access. This this window provides funding through a national implementing entities and devolves the decision on what to fund in terms of adaptation to the entity. And so, for example, a typical project would be whereas the national implementing entity opens a call so that local grassroots organizations can, on a competitive basis, access smaller grants from the funding that we've originally provided.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So at those of us who work with groups at the local level, we keep hearing about the major challenges for local and even national organizations to support locally led action.
What are some of the lessons that you've learned in your efforts to deliver impact on the ground and resources at the local level? And what are some of the challenges you faced?
So I think there are many lessons that we've learned, and I don't want to repeat what others have said. So maybe what I want to say is for us, and maybe that's different than some of the other things that had mentioned, is that I think people still don't know that, people are still learning about these opportunities and how they work and who they're accessible to. So there is that kind of communication piece, and we're working on that. We have a very transparent website that has all the information on how to apply the funds. On top of that, we have e-learning courses that anyone can access that guide the user on a step-by-step basis as to how to access funding from the Adaptation Fund. So that's one piece. The other piece is, this has been said, but I have to say it again, there are some capacity constraints. So basically, the way people communicate proposals to us, and we have to make it sure that everything is in there. So things like sustainability is very important to us, cost effectiveness. So those kinds of things require a bit of literacy. And again, we have a readiness program that to some extent can help with overcoming those barriers. Yeah.
Okay, my last question. So it seems that the Adaptation Fund has had record-breaking pledges here at COP, and we're talking about something like $230 million. Congratulations on that. And at the same time, you've endorsed the principles for locally led adaptation. Now, how are these two things being aligned? And looking forward, what are you going to do that enable local institutions to really drive the agenda for adaptation from the ground with this increased funding that you've got?
So you're right. We did just conclude a pledging session where $32.6 million were pledged. I still haven't absorbed it. And it's a lot of money. It's more money than we have seen in previous years when the pledging is usually done to the Adaptation Fund. As a matter of fact, it's double. It's actually a very good thing for locally led adaptation action, because one of the issues has been rolling out these programmatic approaches such as new windows that can... it's only worth rolling out something like that if you know that the funding is going to be there. And predictability is an issue for funds like ours, and having this big injection of funding is not only in of itself positive, but it also sends a signal that the international community is really invested and will continue to support the fund. So hopefully we can do more things, and we're very excited about that.
Thank you so much. We really look forward to hearing more about the things that the procedures and the impacts and the learning that is going to roll out with these funds that you've received for local action. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suranjana and Saliha, for that great reflection and in-depth conversation. We're now reaching our closing, and it's the end of a long, important day at COP on adaptation, resilience, loss, and damage. We're next going to hear from Sheila Patel, who is the director of the Society for Promotion of Area Resource Centers, former chair of Slum Dwellers International, and a global ambassador for the Race to Resilience, and really one of the driving forces behind the work on locally led adaptation, which she championed fearlessly, doggedly, consistently through the Global Commission on Adaptation, where she was a commissioner. Sheila, I know it's late in your day. If we could just hear 2 to 3 minutes of reflections from you, we'd love to get your thoughts on what you heard today.
Hello, everybody, and Claire and Christina. I feel I have come home.
That's
You know, in the last 2 weeks, I have found myself feeling very alone, fighting for the rights of social movements, claiming that nobody is talking about informality, resources aren't going to people. And I have sat through this whole event just marveling at our journey. And it reminds me so powerfully of something that came up in our women's group a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about all of us championing adaptation and how it's something that each one of us has to do and how it's going to create such a huge volume of voices. And one of the women in the group, one of our oldest members says, you know, adaptation and what you're trying to do is like breathing. Everybody has to breathe for themselves, but it's only when everybody can breathe that the planet breathes. And so I feel that the whole, collaboration and the process by which we have made this collective journey together. First, it was just a very few of us, and today I've heard we've reached 70 organizations, small, modest, global, local. It makes me feel that we have truly begun to explore the new architecture for development that must take over the process of making things work for everybody on our planet. So both of you have worked so relentlessly along with all your colleagues and all of us from all the social movements who have felt very deeply and very strongly respected, listened to, honored by the whole collaboration that produced these principles, which are a codification of something we all believed in, which are simple yet very powerful and have touched everybody, as all the speakers have said. And they give us hope that we leave this COP with a very strong energy and commitment to demonstrate what we can do and how we can use this whole year to actually put in place the foundation, the design, the architecture, the philosophy of what we have begun to believe so strongly in. So I want to thank all of you who are sitting there and all of you who have worked so hard to make this happen. You honor us, you honor all the networks. So thank you very much. And I'm absolutely energized by this session. It tells me that there is a lot of hope, but there are lots and lots of challenges, and that our ability to retain this very strong link between something very specifically local to something that is overarchingly global, whether it's in delivery of resources, producing impact, leveraging the resources, learning from mistakes, be courageous to acknowledge the risks that we take. All the things that we say are very deeply embedded in our principles. I think we can all accept that we have reached a very powerful milestone in our journey. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sheila. So Sheila has been with us, holding our hand through this whole journey, developing the principles. And now we have one of the very newest members of the collective, Beatrice from Clima del Elisau, another of the youth organizations, ready to hold us all to account in what we say we're attempting to do here. The last word to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and to the great honor of closing this event. I'm Beatriz. I'm a young social entrepreneur from Brazil. 2 years ago, I founded an organization that works with climate policy. And especially this year, our organization had the honor of winning the TPA youth policy case on adaptation. And that's how I arrived here at COP. So it's very exciting to see how adaptation is being elevated by having this hub and also by having so much funding coming. And we just endorsed the locally led adaptation because many organizations, and especially youth organizations that are on the grassroots, they already work according to those principles. And it's not even that much of a stretch for us to endorse this because that's how we work. And that's how most of the organizations should be working, to create this strong structure for the people that are on the front lines of the impacts to truly be able to keep their livelihoods. And well, I don't have much more to say. I believe that most of the specialists and the people that participated in the panel already covered a lot. And we really look forward to seeing how these funds will really reach the people that need to reach them, that need those funds, and not to have them locked in the national level by governments, but truly go to the organizations and go to the communities that are already doing adaptation at the front lines. And having accountability and ways to monitor and ways to collectively think on how others will access this and not waste the money through intermediates or with less prioritarian topics would be our key message here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Beatriz. Your words, Sheila's words, are what keep us going and keep us inspired to move ahead. I'm speaking on behalf of many, many different organizations and many, many different people who have worked really tirelessly behind the scenes to bring what you saw today together, behind the principles, behind taking them forward. So I'd really like to thank everyone involved in the process and also invite you to be part of the continuing journey, to learn together. Together we'll go much further and faster. So please do join us and reach out if you'd like more information. Thank you very much and have a good rest of your day. Cheers.